Welcome back to another episode of the Shared Practices podcast. I'm excited to introduce a new segment to the show today. So, as you know, we finished up season 3 of the podcast, and now we're going to start heading into more topics of practice ownership. And before we do that, we wanted to go through a little mini season with some episodes that we've wanted to have on the podcast for a long time. So, I wanted to introduce to you the pre-ownership flashback. And this is a segment that we'll have routinely throughout the course of our show as future seasons continue to progress. And we're going to talk about things that are related to pre-ownership because I think that's a big part of our audience and a big part of who we are. And we don't want to forget that. And we still want to talk to those people and help that portion of our audience. But at the same time, I think we've really covered a lot of pre-ownership content in a lot of depth. And I really want to move into more practice ownership topics. So today we're having on the guest who has the most popular episode on this podcast, Dr. Derek Williams, and he's now joined Dr. Justin Short at the Lifestyle Practice. And so I caught up with him. I really think this is a fantastic interview and a great way to kick off this segment of our show from our most popular guest from the pre-ownership period of our podcast. And so I want to introduce to everybody Dr. Derek Williams. I have with me here today a really, really good friend of mine, Dr. Derek Williams. He is, for those of you who don't remember, we have had him on the podcast twice. This will be his third episode. And Derek did his first interview with Richard. I think it was like almost the second or third episode we've ever released on this podcast. Currently the most listened to episode about buying a practice. And one thing Richard always stresses to me is the importance of timing of an interview. And I think we nailed it with Derek. I think he was a few weeks into ownership and he had just graduated from dental school. He moved his family to East Texas and bought a practice where the seller did not stay on. And so he had a really, I think those are a lot of things that make what he did very, very challenging and all the more impressive. And then I had him on a year ago, and we talked about, how his first year went and where his practice is now. And then now we're having him on again to talk about year 2, and he's doing a lot of other cool things. So welcome back to the show, Dr. Derek Williams.
Thank you, George. It's great to be here.
So last we heard, I think you had doubled the size of the practice about a year ago, and you were just focusing on cutting back some hours. So why don't you go ahead and just tell us an update on your practice, and maybe for those of you people who haven't listened to the first 2 episodes, maybe just a little refresher on your history and all that.
Sure. So I graduated May of 2016. I had this practice lined up and closed in at the end of July. It's here in East Texas in Lufkin. It's a town of it's about 40,000, but it's the seat of the county. So they say that the population during the day is closer to 100,000 from all the jobs and everybody coming in from all the smaller towns. I purchased the practice, and if you go back and listen to those episodes, the first episode, you can kind of hear the stress in my voice and with everything that was going on. It can be pretty challenging. It's hard enough to come out of dental school and then be in private practice running a full schedule, but then you add on top of it the challenges of running a practice, dealing with patient relationships when you own the practice, managing staff, managing the schedule, deciding where to put advertising dollars. There's just a lot more decisions that go into it. So anyway, for anyone that's in that phase, go back and listen to that because it'll make you feel better because even those of us that have been successful, struggle and have hard times.
I feel like you're talking to me right now. For those of you guys who don't know, Derek and I were just talking about it before the interview. I'm right in the middle of that phase, and I was just talking to Derek how stressed I am, and I feel like because of Derek's situation, I set up a lot of things a lot easier for myself. And this whole time, I keep thinking, man, I don't know how Derek did it, like without this little handicap that I've built in for myself. And it's the more I'm in it, the more impressive what you did is. So I'm probably going to listen to that interview soon as well.
Well, it's interesting because I hired Justin Short about a month into ownership, and I remember talking to him in the beginning and just saying, man, I just am so overwhelmed. There's just so many things to do. There's so many decisions to make. I come home and I just feel like it's never ending. I mean, and I remember him telling to me, and it gave me hope at the time, but he said, a year from now, you're going to look back on this situation and you're going to think, wow, my life is so different. And, it's going to be much more hands off for you. But he said, it's important that you put in the work, put in the time to set yourself up to be in that situation a year from now. And, you go and listen to the second interview podcast with you guys, and I think you can definitely tell a big difference. But, at that point, I had put in a lot of time and training with staff. It was much more hands off. I didn't worry about the practice outside of the time that I was working in the practice. So an update now on the practice. So we are now on track this year to do 3 times what the practice was doing originally when I bought it. And I also cut back 1 day a week. So I've gone from, I've essentially cut out 25% of my working time in the practice, but we've increased our collections by about another 20-25% this year. So it's really been pretty incredible to get to that point. And I just feel like I have a lot of freedom in my lifestyle, and things just seem to be going pretty smooth right now.
So I think, for everybody who's listened to the podcast has probably caught the Justin Short miniseries, and that sounds very Justin Short of you to cut your hours, increase your collections, and I think that's kind of what you guys are all about. So talk to our audience maybe who are not able to understand how exactly you're able to do that. Maybe show them why it's possible and the kind of things that takes. Briefly, I know that's a big topic.
Yeah. First of all, it's a leap. I mean, it's a big leap to make that decision. Justin actually kind of put the idea in my head it's probably a little over a year ago. But it took me about, I don't know. I mean, when he first told me, it totally caught me off guard. I mean, he said, you're probably getting to the point where you could cut back a day a week and probably at least maintain the production that you're doing now. And so, I mean, it kind of like put that little pit in my stomach, but I kind of kept that thought in my mind. And it was actually in August of last year, but I was reading the book Relentless by Tim Grover. And a really good book, by the way. If you haven't read it, it's one of my favorites. But in there, he talks about developing a mentality. You can have what you want, and that if you're willing to work and you're willing to do the right things necessary, you can have it. I know I'm not doing that book justice, but that was the main idea that stuck in my head at that moment. And I remember, you always hear Dennis complain about September, about, the slow month of the year. It was August at that time. And the last week of August started to get a little bit slow for me. And at that point, I was listening to that book, and I still remember on my way driving to the office, I listened to it and I decided, you know what? I'm doing this. We're going to 3 days a week. So I got to the office. I told my staff, my front desk, I said, cancel my Thursdays for September. And so we did it. The first week, actually, I think was, what is the holiday in September? Is it Labor Day?
Yeah, I think there's a Monday off somewhere.
Yeah, so I think that first week I had a 3-day work week just because of that holiday, but then after that we changed. Anyway, so it turns out that September we did about average. I think we may have had a small drop, but the next month, October, was our best month of the entire year with me working only 3 days a week. And that just gave me this huge amount of confidence and made me really excited for the future. So, but your question, sorry, I'm taking a long time to get to your question. Your question is, how does that happen? There's a few things that make that happen. One is when you cut back and you're not in the office, you're not doing as much time clinically, it makes you, it helps you develop this urgency of being forced to be more efficient. So it helped me to kind of learn to kind of cut out some of the fluff in the schedule to get our scheduling more efficient. I don't know that I really did much treatment planning differently. I maybe started doing a little bit more of some profitable cases, but I think the biggest thing is just making the jump and being willing to do it. And at that point, it forces you to become more efficient and you become busier and learn how to be more productive.
And Derek, so do you have, just so I can get an idea, do you have 2 hygienists or 1?
2.
Okay, so then that day that you're off on Thursday, I'm assuming the office is still open?
Yeah, it is.
So a big question that people had when Justin was talking about that same type of setup is what do you guys do with hygiene on the day that you're not there?
So we basically have hygienists schedule patients that can come in and don't need an exam. So what that means is perio maintenance patients, when they had an exam last time, we always try and schedule them on Thursdays. Or patients where they just got X-rays and an exam, and they're fairly low caries risk, then we're going to really try and schedule them on Thursdays. So pretty much all the patients that they see on Thursdays are low risk patients that don't have a whole lot of risk or as big of need to get those exams. But we do make sure that all of our patients get exams at least once a year.
Gotcha. Okay, and then so you've kind of made that big jump. Is there anything else in the practice that has really changed since the last time that we had you on?
One thing that I've implemented at the beginning of this year, we've had a bonus system in the past. It's been kind of just basically at my discretion. I've told staff if we reach X amount, then the bonus will be this amount. And at the beginning of the year, we switched and basically have gone to the 20% bonus system, which Justin and I talk about, and PDA. If you go to Productive Dentist Academy, they'll talk about a couple different bonus systems, and this is one of them as well. Anyway, my last year, when basically at the end of the year, I looked at my total overhead amount for staff, so including pay and benefits and taxes, everything associated with payroll. It came out to be, it was like 19.7%. And that included the bonuses that I was giving them. So then I basically did the math and I said, okay, if we do $100,000 a month, then I can keep that at 20%. But anything we do above that, the staff could get 20% of that excess, and I can still keep my payroll overhead at 20%. So I gave this, I pitched this to them, and they were excited about it. And every month so far this year, each one of them has got a bonus of anywhere between $500 and $1,200. So it's made a huge difference, and I think that's probably part of what goes into our increase this year of being able to do so well, is that everyone's more on board. They look at our goals, they look at how close they are, they like to see what the bonus is going to be for the month, and they're starting to take ownership in the practice. They're starting to realize more the role that they can in helping patients to make dentistry a priority. Whereas before, maybe the hygienist, I come in, we talk about treatment, and the hygienist asks if they want to schedule. They say they'll think about it. and they just let it go. Well, maybe now, they're keeping things in mind, and if that patient still says, well, I'm going to think about it, hygienist now is going to say, you really should make this a priority. By making this a priority, you're going to have a better smile. You're going to be able to eat better, whatever those advantages are. But it's helping all the staff to take ownership. They're getting paid better. Our production and collections as an office are better as well. So that's been a really big thing this year that I've implemented that I think has helped a lot.
I love the way you guys do the bonus system because of the fact that they have, any increase in, a same day treatment that's converted or a cancellation that's filled, there's a direct benefit to everybody involved. So I like the way that you guys do that, and I think it's a really effective way of incentivizing staff. So I think a big change you've made is you've joined Justin Short, with TLP, the lifestyle practice. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that? I think that's something really exciting.
Yeah. So I finished coaching with Justin, and we had kept in touch. And he was, after I got the practice really going well, I started getting his help to invest in real estate, and so we kind of kept in touch. I was just talking to him about different things, and he offered me, he said, hey, if you'd like to partner with me in the lifestyle practice, come on as a coach. Let's think about doing this. And so, we went through a period, but basically at the beginning of this year in January, we partnered together, and I've been playing more of a partner role in TLP. So I'm, a lot of the emails and stuff that Justin's been sending out to subscribers, I've been writing and sending out as well. I've started coaching clients and working with them as a coach. So that's where I'm at, and it's been so awesome. It's been a lot of fun for me. I've realized that I'm more passionate about teaching others and helping others to reach, to do some of the things that I've done. It really brings me a lot of fulfillment. So it's been awesome.
And it's funny because we met, and I was a first-year dental student, and you were a third-year dental student, and we've kind of been in some sort of communication really on a regular basis ever since then. And I remember recently, something was bothering me about, I think it was the practice, something like that, and I just happened to be, I think we had to talk about something, so I gave you a call, and then I kind of telling you what's bothering me, and then you were walking me through it, and I remember getting off the phone, I was thinking, wow, that really helped, and, you're very good at that, and I just felt like I didn't, I think you were very natural in the role, and I had never seen you that way because of our, history together. You had never been really coach, and honestly, I was very impressed, and I feel like you're in the way that you communicate and relate. I think you're very effective at it.
Quick word from our sponsor, Q Optics. I've got with us here Brent Downs, who is the director of sales at Q Optics, and he's got a little bit of advice for that new dentist going to their first conference.
We'll call her the light bulb lady. This goes back to the early 90s. I was in a booth right next to her, and this lady was legendary in how she would attract people into her booth. And, the unsuspecting dentist within a matter of just a few seconds would have his bags on the ground and 2 light bulbs in his hands.
And we're talking like color-corrected ceiling lights or something?
Exactly. Exactly. And she was just a master at communicating, but she was also one of the most pesky sales reps that I've ever met in my life. It got to the point where she was around for years. People would see her walking down the aisle, and they would literally turn around to avoid her. And it made for just a miserable experience for me.
Working next to her.
Exactly. I didn't have a whole lot of people to talk to that week. And the point is, the lesson that I learned from that is just, don't be afraid to say no. You're not going to hurt any feelings. It's just business, and they've got a job to do. Maybe they're a little bit aggressive in how they go about it, but
Sure.
You have to protect your self-interest. So no is a good thing to say.
It's a good little word to learn, and you're never going to hurt anyone's feelings just by learning a little bit and moving on.
Exactly.
Awesome. If you're ready to upgrade your magnification experience, send an email to sales@qoptics.com using the promo code SP16 for $100 off a pair of loupes or $300 off a loupe and light combo. They will figure out who the rep in your area is and schedule a demo for you where you can get fitted, try them out, see for yourselves. Worst case scenario, you say no. Not a big deal. Q Optics. Have a better look.
And so in your experience with clients, what have been, where are your clients at right now? I know you have a very, client base, but where are they at? And then, what kinds of things have you been able to really help them with?
Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words. I think it feels very natural and genuine to me because, I've been there, I've been through it, and so it's just kind of part of who I am, and I like helping other people to make decisions and become the leader that they can be. Anyway, so your question. Tell me your question one more time.
No worries. I caught you off guard there. But you have a varying set of clients. So yeah. I think to give our listeners an idea of like where your clients are at in their careers and what kind of things you're really helping them with, and the things that have been giving you a lot of satisfaction and joy.
Yeah. So, there's quite a variety. I have a client that has been a dentist for several years, has owned 2 practices and actually just bought his 3rd. And then, I have other clients that have owned, for a year or 2 and are looking at taking things to the next level. And then I have other people that are, just barely starting out in ownership. So there's a pretty good range, but I enjoy, the challenges that come with each one. So the types of things that we're looking at doing, one of the things that I love about the lifestyle practice is that it's very tailored to the individual. We start out the process by getting to know the client and their vision, their goals. Where do they want to be in a year? Where do they want to be in 5 years? What are the biggest priorities in their life? What would they be doing if money didn't matter as much? And when we can get to know those aspects of the dentist, it helps us to formulate a plan and to work towards goals that are going to get them closer to that big picture. I think that's one thing that's really important and is missing from a lot of other consultants, just because a lot of times it's just at least in my experience, I haven't worked with a ton of other consultants besides Justin, but a lot of times they come in, look at the numbers. Well, let's do this, and it's much more the consultant kind of just handing, here's a binder, here's these protocols for this, let's go ahead and do this. Whereas with Justin and I, the goal is to help that person become a leader, help the dentist make the decisions and to implement the things that are going to get them closer to their goals. So, for example, this dentist that just bought his 3rd practice, one of the goals has been to have more family time, to increase passive income. So I've been working with him. He's cut back a day every other week, and one of the things that we've started to focus on more is basically that we have to look at his return on his time. And a lot of times it will be, especially as he grows more into this administrative role, if he can spend an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks where he's meeting with his associates and he's talking about diagnosing or treatment planning or case acceptance or, going into these things that we talk about and train our dentists to do, and he can help, his practices increase. Let's just give an example. Let's say, in most of his practices, he has 2 dentists. If he meets with them once a month and just for an hour goes over a few things, let's say each one of them gets an extra case acceptance of, even just, let's just give a low number of, let's say 2,500 per dentist. Well, that's 5,000 a month. And if he's got 3 practices, that's an extra 15,000 a month. And when you look at that for a year, I didn't do the math beforehand, but that's a big return on, just an hour a month of his time versus, if he were just going to, do more clinical dentistry himself. So with him, the approach has been a little bit different. It's been, okay, once you are doing these things and you can apply them well and be the leader in your practice, your focus then goes to your associates. That's what's going to give you the highest return. And he just sent me an email the other day telling me how much that he was taking the week off, and he had checked the numbers at the practice, and all of his associates had produced more than their what they had been doing recently. So that's one thing that's really fulfilling for me, is to see other people finding ways to be more productive, to make the same amount of money or more, and to have a better lifestyle, be able to spend time with their families, which is really what my lifestyle is all about.
I love that. Yeah, and I think, it's maybe on the surface, you have 1 practice, your client has 3. I think, how you're able to help him is unique and, probably very valuable to him because of the fact that there's a lot of demanding, people, needing his time and, where to delegate it. And that's kind of what you guys are all about. So I think that's really awesome. And, I think you guys have an interesting role for our audience, because our audience is mainly people who are looking to become a practice owner. We talk a lot about, how to become a practice owner. So naturally, we don't really appeal to people who already are. So, what kind of things do you like? So if you were coaching a pre-owner, which I know you do, what kind of things would you advise them on? How would they make decisions? What kind of things are you guys talking about?
So for someone that is looking to get into ownership, we're talking about a few different things. So first of all, most of the clients that I work with are already in ownership or are very new in ownership. There's a few people here and there that talk to me and say, "Hey, how can I get involved and kind of get the ball rolling before I get into ownership?" For those people, there's a couple options. One is to join the TLP Academy, which gives them access to all of the information that Justin and I teach our clients. It's in the online format, gives them access to our mastermind group so that they can they have access to all of this, and they can really start developing their mindset and can see when they get into ownership what types of things they want to be implementing and how to get there. So it partially depends how quickly you're looking to get into ownership, but I think this is always a really great option because the cost is lower, and it kind of gives you time to really digest everything and kind of to process it and let it become part of you internally. Then when you're put in the position to start making those decisions, it comes a lot more naturally. We've had clients that have done this, and then when they get to ownership, hire either Justin or I as their coach, and at that point, it's so much more smooth sailing. They understand a lot of the principles, but now the question is, well, how do I implement this in my specific practice? Or it's questions like, there's all these different things that I can do. What's the most important one for me to start working on now? So, but some of the other things, that I'm talking about or helping clients with, if they're looking at practices or looking to get into it quickly or more soon, then, it's a little bit of a jump start process. So they get access to all the TLP Academy stuff, start going through that, start listening to it. Let's start looking at practices. Usually at that point, they've already been looking at practices, but they want some feedback on, what opportunities are better than others.
And so you guys, so then let's just say, you're working with somebody, they get into practice ownership. And I think for me, at least, one of the biggest anxieties you have is the staff. And I don't know if that's, the case for all your clients, but what kind of things are you helping them with? Like what are the early ownership struggles that people go through? And what are the kind of main things you guys are usually dealing with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think staff is usually the number one concern. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it. There's different transition types with, each dentist. Some it's a walk-away transition. In your case, I know that you're basically there with the selling dentist for a period of time, and that happens a lot too. So generally, this is, like I said, there's no one right answer for everything, but generally my advice is, look, this practice has been around for X amount of time and has been doing these kind of numbers. So, by looking at the numbers, we know that they're going to cash flow all right and be fine if the practice just continues to maintain what they're doing. So my advice is, hey, when you get in for the first month, try not to rock the boat too much. You got to think of it from the staff's perspective. It's kind of like they always say, you go and run into a bear in the forest or a cougar or something. That animal is probably just as scared of you as you are of it. But the reaction is to fight. So you got to remember that too with staff. A lot of us dentists are kind of nervous about the process, but man, the staff is probably a much bigger change for them than it is for us. For them, they've been in this practice for however long. Now they're getting a whole new boss. They're thinking, gosh, is the boss going to want to keep me around? Are they going to change our pay benefits? Are they going to change our vacation? Are they going to change this practice? Are they going to, they have all these questions going through their head. Actually, when I met my staff for the first time, it was kind of intimidating. I walked in and, I just tried to be, happy, friendly, confident. And I walk in and they say, we sit down and one of the staff says, I've been nominated as the spokesperson. I have a list of questions that we've thought of for you. So yeah, the very first time I'm meeting them, they're asking me questions about benefits. They're asking me, can I give the same good type of injections as the seller has and, baby the patients as much. So it was actually, in that situation, it was actually a good thing because I was able to see, all their concerns and stuff. But my answer for most of those questions was, look, I know this is a big change for all of you, and I can't do this by myself. I'm really going to have to depend a lot on all of you while we get through this transition period. And I'm going to do my best to keep everything the way that it is right now in the beginning. In the future, we'll talk together about making changes, but I'm not the type of person to just come in and implement my own agenda. When we make changes, it'll be in the future, and I'll talk to you and I'll get your feedback on it. But for the time being, I'm going to try and make as little change as possible. And I think that really sets everyone at ease and helps the process flow a little bit more smoothly at the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't think that, that meeting of the staff for the first time, that's not easy. That's for nobody, it's awkward for, I think, them and for you. Now, in early ownership, what other challenges are people having other than the staff? And how are you guys helping? What are you guys doing to help them?
Usually, okay, so there's a couple different situations, a couple different types of opportunities that we're looking at. One is a situation where you're going in, you're replacing the dentist, and they're already doing production collections that you're happy with, and you're not really looking to add to it. You want to just kind of maintain. In that situation, there's probably less of a need for a coach. Most of our clients are the other situation, which is a value add practice. In the value add practice, which is very typical, like a practice like mine when I bought it was doing about $500,000, and still a good practice, cash flowed well. But in that situation, a lot of times there's 100 different ways that you can grow, whether it's adding procedures or looking at advertising and getting new patients, or dropping the lowest reimbursing insurance. There's a lot of different options. So in the beginning, a lot of it has to do with coming up with a plan and looking at all of those changes that can be made, and we need to evaluate those. We don't want to go in and just start implementing everything. So this is usually the way it goes is like this. So, we talk about this and kind of come up with a plan from the very beginning. That first month, though, I'm telling you, look, don't really make a lot of changes. Just try and get to know the staff. Ask questions like, so how do you guys do this? How do you do accounts receivable? How do you schedule? How do you, be the learner, have an open mind. That type of interaction with the staff is going to go much better when you start to look at making changes in the future rather than the person that just wants to do it from the get-go. So that first month, we're just doing a lot of observing and trying to understand the flow of the practice and become part of the practice. Then at that second meeting, when we're talking, we're looking at all these changes and we're deciding what we want to do. And the way that we evaluate and decide is we're essentially looking at a couple different things about all of these different ways we can grow. We're looking at first, what out of all of these, let's say we have a list of 10 things that we want to implement over the next, 6 months or whatever. Out of all of these items, which of them are going to be the easiest for staff to implement? And then the second question is, out of all these items and changes, which of them is going to bring the greatest return or help us to increase production and collections the most? So let me give a couple examples. Some of those that might be easy for staff would be things like possibly, let's say that the dentist does some extractions and you want to start doing do more surgicals or things like that. That's a very easy thing that, can add a lot to the bottom line, but really doesn't take a whole lot more training for the staff. Maybe there's a couple other instruments you want or a little bit different, but really not any added stress to the staff, but it should make a difference in the production and collections. Versus, if we're looking at other things like, the front desk answers the phone and she answers these questions in this type of way. I think we can really improve in this way. Okay, well, when we look at and evaluate that, that's probably going to add more stress to the front desk. And yes, it's going to help increase because maybe it helps convert more new patients, but it's not going to have as big of a return of some of those other items. So other things like advertising, if we decide to do something like that, it's probably not going to add it's not changing things for staff. Yeah, they might have to answer more calls or kind of work through some things more, but they're not going to change really too much the way that they work through it. So, like I said, again, we're looking at all of these things, and in the beginning, we're looking at what is going to be the easiest for staff to implement and bring the greatest returns.
I wanted to take a minute to talk about the sponsor for today's episode, Lendeavor. Lendeavor is the modern lender to dental practices. With innovative software, exceptional service, and decades of combined experience in dental practice lending, Lendeavor is reshaping the experience of getting a practice loan. Practice owners are some of our economy's most highly trained and hardest working entrepreneurs. Yet, financing a practice takes too long and costs too much. Lendeavor is a team of credit experts, software engineers, computer scientists, financiers, lawyers, and academics that have come together to deliver market-leading rates, speed, and convenience. They've built software that takes complicated transactions, like buying your first practice, and makes them simple. As a result, you spend less time applying for your loan, and they spend less time processing it. This efficiency means faster funding and lower rates for you. Whether you're acquiring your first practice, remodeling, or expanding your existing practice, buying commercial real estate, or even updating equipment, take the first step today by pre-qualifying online in minutes. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Lendeavor's online pre-qualification is safe, secure, and seamless, and pre-qualifying with Lendeavor will never affect your credit score. Click the link in the show notes or send an email to info@lendeavor.com to learn more. Financing made or arranged pursuant to California Financing Law, license number 60DBO53100. I love that. And I think, like you had mentioned, I think a lot of times we can get caught in the minutia of the way we want things done versus the way that they are done right now. And if that's not a big opportunity to change that thing, then you're just adding a lot of unneeded stress to not only your life, but your staff's life.
Yeah, completely agree.
And so now moving forward, kind of wrapping up our interview a little bit, what are your goals in the future? And, thinking now you've just finished up your second year of ownership. So what are you looking at I guess you're about to finish your second year. What are you looking at year 3, 4, and what are your future plans?
Yeah, I think I'd like to look at other ways to grow the practice little by little each year. I'm not I guess at some point you start to hit a little bit of a plateau. And if I want to keep growing at this same rate, I've got to do a few things. One is that I've either got to bring an associate on and, start doing some much more highly profitable procedures that can still allow me to grow the practice, the production and collections, but still keep my time at the 3-day work week. I don't know that I'll go less than 3 days because I'm pretty happy with the way that this is working out. Like I said, I don't know that I'm going to be adding an associate or doing those things because right now, it's a pretty well-oiled machine. It's my cash cow. So a lot of my focus at this point has to do with increasing my passive income. So last year I started investing in real estate. At this point, I own 6 single-family rentals and am basically working towards goals to, continue to grow that portfolio and get to a point where if I continue to do dentistry, that it's something that I'm choosing to do rather than feeling like I have to be tied down to doing it to pay for all my monthly expenses. So that's a big part of my goals over the next couple of years.
And then I remember, you moved to where you're at, Lufkin, for the practice itself. Now, in terms of your enjoyment of the actual city itself and, adapting to the overall, living in East Texas, how has that kind of progression been for you?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm glad you brought it up because I do get asked this question quite a bit because it's a question that people think of because everybody hears, everybody says I've got to go rural to make more money. And, you're in a rural area. How bad does it suck? And first of all, I want to clarify, you don't have to go to, these areas like this to be able to do something. I do believe that that's played a role in my success. I'd like to think that, all of it's just due to me, hiring the right coach and making the right moves and decisions. But part of it is, I bought a practice in an area that was, I could hit the ground running much more easily. So, but there is a trade-off. Here in Lufkin, we have, pretty much most of the restaurants that we want to eat at. There's, we can go to the movies. We can do a lot of the entertainment that we want to do. But there are not some of the things that a bigger city has. We moved from Omaha, which Omaha, Nebraska had a really cool zoo that we lived close to, had a cool children's museum. The College World Series is there every year. So no, we don't have a lot of those things here. But, if we do want to go spend a day in Houston or Tyler's another city that's close, we can make the drive an hour or two and go do some of those things and stay for a weekend and still kind of get those same things. So yes, there's a trade-off, but man, having the lifestyle and having the ability to spend more time with my family, to be able to, start investing in real estate and setting up the foundation for my life, man, it's totally worth it. I mean, no question about it.
All right. And then last question, I'm going to throw a curveball at you a little bit. So looking back over the last 2 years, since you graduated dental school, anything you would do differently?
That's a good question.
It's funny because you've had, obviously extreme amounts of success. So, I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah. I have thought of this question before because, sometimes people ask the question, have you ever made a bad investment or, made a bad decision? I started, honestly, I can't think of much that I really would do differently. I've been really happy with the results. I took an ortho course, to do braces, spent 4 weekends in California doing that. And I did not like it. Part of it is, I didn't have a whole lot of training on it in dental school. So I didn't have a great foundation. So I ended up spending a decent amount of money going to that course and then buying supplies. And, I just didn't enjoy it. So I don't do it anymore. It has benefited me because I do clear correct on, some simple cases that I feel like are going to be successful. And I have a little bit of that ortho background so I can understand things a little bit better. But, so not necessarily that I regret it, but it was a decent amount of time and money that I spent that, really hasn't added a whole lot of value in my life. But as far as, how I've worked through things, I've always been kind of a workaholic, and I worried that when I got into ownership that I would be the type of person that would want to just work and have a hard time taking time off because of the money that I would lose, because that's kind of how I looked at things when I was a teenager and was younger and was working. But I've been very proud of myself that I've been able to keep a really good balance and have been able to spend a lot of time with my family, but still grow a practice and have a great income and start doing some of these other things that I'm getting into now.
I knew you were going to mention the ortho class. Actually, when you were thinking about it, I'm like, he's going to mention ortho. Okay, so, taking that, however much money it is, let's just put a number on it. So we have let's just say $8,000 or whatever that you spent on that. What would you have spent money on instead?
That's a good question. I think I hesitate in answering the question because I don't want to say it as like I'm giving advice to others. I had a decent amount of training in implants and endo and oral surgery in dental school, and I was able to kind of hit the ground running doing that. But if I was going to spend money clinically, I would spend money on some of these courses that have to do with one of those 3 areas. I would prioritize it this way. I think getting good at endo and extractions are probably the first area that I would focus on, because those are your emergency patients. Those are patients coming in that are ready to spend the money to fix this problem that they have, and they do not want to be sent somewhere else. They don't want to come to you just to be sent somewhere else. So spending some money on that would be wise. Implants, I also think is a great return on investment of time and money. And then when you've got those things down, I think spending money to increasing your business training, I think courses like Breakaway and Productive Dentist Academy I think are, really great things that you could do at that point. So at that point, I guess, so this is a very long way of answering your question, but at that point, I had already done breakaway and had, the training that I wanted as far as those things that I mentioned, but I hadn't done Productive Dentist Academy yet. So if I had to pick, I guess I would pick that one to go back and do something.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on, Derek, for a third time. And I think Justin's been on the podcast now, if you include the mini-series, 13 times. So we got a few times to have you back on to make up for that, so you can equal him. So we'll see you on the podcast hopefully soon then.
Yeah, I got some catching up to do.
All right, Derek, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
Wow. I don't know about you guys, but I really, really thought that Derek just showed how far he's come from when his first episode on the show, when he had just bought his practice like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think that if there's one thing to get throughout this whole thing is look at Derek's, go listen to his first interview and see the way that he was talking, the confidence that he had, and then listen to the second one that we did with him about a year ago, and then listen to the one today again. And I really think you'll see just how far Derek has come and how he really went from somebody who was, overwhelmed as a new owner to somebody who was confident as a new owner and really pushing the envelope on how much success they can have in their practice, to now where, he's helping other people and he's learning not only from his own experiences, but he's helping others, and in that, probably improving himself. So I really think that this was a fantastic episode, and I'm excited for next week's episode, where we're going to have on Dr. Justin Short from the Lifestyle Practice to talk about practice vision. So stick around, and I hope you guys are enjoying this pre-ownership flashback, and we'll see you next week on the Shared Practices podcast.